Hey guys, welcome to today. Today I'm going to give you guys a preview of a fantastic series that we have that you really need to read. It's called Half Upon a Time by James Riley. Now some of you readers out there might recognize the name James Riley, and that is because he is also the author of a couple of other series we have at both Thornton and South Branch called The Story Thieves and Revenge of Magic. Both of them are great series to read, and if you haven't picked up Half Upon a Time, you are missing out on a fantastic series. But before we get to that, I have a question for you. We know our fairy tales, right? Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Snow White, Aladdin, Princess and the Frog, Rapunzel, Peter Pan. Like we know these stories. We watch the Disney movies. So we know what happens, right? Or do we? Like, we know what Disney says is what happens, but do we know what really happens? And I have another question. In these movies, the princes and the princesses always end up together, right? But if the princesses already have their prince, then what do future princesses, or what do future princes get? And what do they have to do? Well, I guess they would need to go to school so they can learn how to rescue princesses if they can find one. So here's where we're leaving with Jack, right? Jack here, who may or may not be related to the real Jack and the Beanstalk. His grandfather is most definitely the hero of all kinds of crazy stories, and he really wants Jack to follow in his footsteps, of course. But Jack here is like, why? Why go on an adventure? Why rescue and marry some stuck up royal that can't even get out of bed and find her own shoes? Like, what's the purpose of that, right? We have Philip over here, who may or may not be in the process of becoming the same Philip that you read in Sleeping Beauty. But right now, he doesn't really care about Aurora. He doesn't really want anything to do with Aurora. He's much more interested in fighting giants, so he's kind of out of the picture. And then our third character we have here is May. And May, as you can probably tell from her clothes, is a little bit different from the other characters in this fairy tale world. And we're not quite sure what's happening with her, but I'm going to read you guys a short excerpt from this book. And we're going to kind of figure out exactly where is May coming from, and what could she be doing, and how is what is happening to her going to affect both Philip and Jack? Let's figure this out. If adventure's going to find me, Jack growled angrily, it can find me right here. If you're right, it shouldn't matter where I am. I should be able to just stick out my arms and have a princess fall right into them. So he stuck out his arms to highlight how stupid his grandfather's argument was. And above him a circle of blue fire exploded open in the middle of the air. Out of the middle of the flaming circle, a person fell to the ground less than a foot from Jack's outstretched arms. For a second, both Jack and his grandfather were too shocked to say anything. As usual, though, his grandfather recovered first. You really have to work on your aim, boy, the old man said. Jack quickly ran forward to see if the person, a girl, was hurt. She was lying on her stomach, so Jack quickly turned her over, sighing in relief when he saw she was still breathing. He looked her over, trying to figure out if she broke anything, but she seemed okay. That was, other than her odd appearance. The strangest thing had to be the streak of startling blue playing through the girl's dirty blonde hair. That couldn't have been natural. Some sort of magic had to be involved. Not that her clothes were normal either. Her pants were dark blue, worn through in some places, but almost new in others. Her black shirt was much thinner material than her pants and barely had any sleeves. And then Jack saw something that made him gasp in surprise. What? His grandfather asked, creeping up behind Jack to look. Is it dead? The old man noticed what Jack had seen, and he leaped into the air, almost giddy with excitement. Jack, my boy, he shouted, you have done it. You've found one. Jack shook his head, still staring at the girl. She couldn't be. Could she? He read the words on her shirt again out loud this time. Punk princess? This girl was a princess? And where exactly was Punk? Think she's all right? Jack's grandfather asked, tapping her leg with his foot. Don't kick her, Jack whispered. She's a princess. The old man kicked her again. That doesn't mean she's all right. Just let me handle this, okay? Jack said as he bent over the girl protectively. His grandfather grunted and wandered off in the direction of their cottage, hopefully to get a blanket or something. Meanwhile, the girl hadn't woken up, which wasn't a good sign. The sort of fall from the fire circle in the sky shouldn't have been enough to knock her out, so it must have been something else. A spell, maybe? Jack frowned. If it was a magical sleep, there was a very specific way to wake up a princess. Jack crinkled his nose, his forehead, struggling to remember his lessons from school. She had to be kissed, yes, but did the kisser have to be a prince? Why were there so many rules to these stupid spells anyway? This had to be the sort of thing he ignored on general principle. How often did someone just trip over a sleeping princess after all? Jack had been much more interested in learning why bees stung or what part of the month were-rabbits transformed into humans rather than how to deal with spoiled royals who couldn't get out of bed. Do you have to be a prince to wake a sleeping princess? Jack whispered to his returning grandfather, who instead of bringing back something useful had dragged out a chair to sit on. Who knows, the old man said. Smooch her and see what happens. Jack glared at him. I'm not going to kiss her. If you don't, I will, the old man says. You think she wants to wake up to this? He pointed to his bearded, wrinkled face. Jack nodded. Good point. He bent over the girl, then paused, suddenly nervous. Whoever this girl was, she was all kinds of cute and about his age. Plus, she was royalty, whereas he was just some idiot covered in cave dirt. Do it already, his grandfather shouted. In my day, she'd be awake and married to you by now. Shh, Jack hissed, his face just inches from the princess's. I don't want to do this wrong. You've never kissed a girl, have you? His grandfather said and snorted. We really do have to get you out of this village. Jack just growled in response and turned back to the girl. Good luck, princess, Jack whispered to her and smushed his mouth against hers. The princess's eyes immediately flew open. She sat up so fast her head smacked right into Jack's. A hollow bonk echoed through the clearing. Ow! The princess yelled, grabbing her head. Ow! Jack shouted, falling backward and holding his forehead as well. His grandfather almost fell backward out of his chair too, but only because he was laughing so hard. Now, extremely awake, the princess glared all around, looking confused, scared, and pained all at once. Grandma? She yelled. She started to get to her feet, but quickly fell back down, apparently still woozy from whatever had knocked her out. Grandma? She yelled more urgently, then turned to Jack, her eyes wide with fear. Who are you? Where am I? Where's my grandmother? Abruptly, her look went from scared to annoyed. And what made you think that kissing me was okay? Jack turned fiery red. Yeah, sorry about that, he said quietly. The princess grunted, still glaring. Where's the guy in the green? She asked. Where's my grandmother? Jack shook his head, a little done with all her questions. No idea, he said, trying to stay patient. You're the only one who fell out of the sky. A girl looked up at the now empty sky, the sun setting in the distance. Wait, the fire tunnel, she said, almost to herself. And it was after midnight a second ago. Why is it so light here? Where am I? Giant's Hand, princess, Jack's grandfather said, pushing past Jack. A small village in the kingdom of Blunderbush. The old man waited for a sign of recognition, but when he got none, he just shrugged. It's a pretty small kingdom, he admitted. So we're going to skip forward a little bit here. Go toward when they're about to go into Jack's house. Not 10 seconds after Jack closed the cottage door behind them, a blue circle of fire reopened in midair, and a giant of a man dressed entirely in green dropped out of the center, landing slightly in a crouch. The man carefully touched the spot where May had landed just minutes earlier, then glanced in the direction of Jack's cottage. The man in green smiled, stood up, and slipped silently into the forest to wait for his prey to emerge. Dun dun dun. So let me get this straight. We have Jack, who wants nothing at all to do with rescuing princesses, because who wants to marry a stuck-up royal? We have Philip, whom you will meet in this book, who wants nothing to do with Aurora and is much more concerned with killing giants. And we have May, who falls out of the sky, who was wearing a t-shirt that's titled Punk Princess, but we're not quite sure where Punk is, and who doesn't know where her grandmother is, but could be chased by a green huntsman. Now let's think here. What fairy tale do we know where a huntsman chases a princess? Could it be that her grandmother is Snow White? And if so, why is a huntsman chasing May? And what does all of this have to do with a beanstalk? I guess you're gonna have to check out this book, Half Upon a Time, at Thornton Library to find out. Bye guys.